we'll have to talk about another topic, which is there are two topics actually we have to talk about. One is the cultural regions of the world, and related with this topic is another topic, that is ethnic diversity of India. Plus cultural regions of India. So there are three topics which are interrelated to each other. Now first, if we talk about the cultural regions of the world. First of all, what do you understand by the term culture? What is culture? It is simply a way of life. So here when we are talking about culture, culture simply refers to a way of life. That means if we are talking about way of life, that means should culture include variety of aspects, like for example, should it include the economic aspects of life? Can we say that it is also part of culture? Like for example, if a country is agrarian, is it part of culture? It is part of culture. What type of agriculture is practiced? What is the living standards? All the economic aspects, they are part and parcel of the culture. There would be other things as well. For example, you tell me, can I say that other things like architecture, it is part of culture, religion, language, all these aspects are part and parcel of culture. Food habits, or simply we can call them as cuisines. Others like dressing, art, and we can keep on going. There is no limit. That is what we essentially mean by the term culture. Why we are doing this? You tell me. Suppose if question is, examine the Islamic cultural realm. Can I say मुझे ये सभी चीजें बतानी पड़ेंगी? Do I have to talk about all of these things? I will have to talk about what is the economic aspect. For example, initially it was based on pastoralist economy. Later on, what happened with this realm? We find that today there is oil-based economy, which is there. And as a result of which, good economic development has taken place. But what about the social development? It has essentially lagged. There is high economic disparity among the people. Specifically, if you talk about the status of women, it's very, very low. All these are essentially what? These are part and parcel of the Islamic culture. ठीक है? That means बहुत सारी चीजें जो यहाँ पर लिखी हुई हैं, these are essentially what? These are the things that you will be describing. इसका मतलब कि अगर मुझे नहीं भी मैंने पढ़ रखा है इस टॉपिक को, कैन आई से इतनी तो जीए जनरल नॉलेज होती है कि यू विल बी एबल टू राइट समथिंग अबाउट any of the cultural realms which are being asked in the examination. ठीक है? So that is one important aspect, that is culture. Now, cultural region, if you talk about, the concept of cultural region. Cultural region. So if you talk about the idea of cultural region, we can explain it from two perspectives. One perspective is the perspective of Karl Sawyer. So we have already seen Sawyer. What was the basic idea of Sawyer? He saw that a natural landscape is ultimately getting converted to a cultural landscape with application with culture. So there is a natural landscape there is cultural landscape is converted. So again, natural landscape mein, so many things we can talk about. It would include it would be the aspects of topography, the aspects of climate, the aspect of vegetation, the aspect of drainage, soil, etc. So many things. On the other hand, cultural landscape, जो अभी हमने सब चीजें लिखी थी, economic, political, social, so many things are part and parcel of the cultural landscape, including, for example, settlement systems, architecture, everything is part and parcel of the cultural landscape. So that is one idea we can take up. Another is when we are talking about cultural regions, the development of cultural region is essentially function of presence of centripetal and some centrifugal forces. When this type of relationship exists, where centripetal force is greater than the centrifugal tendencies, we can call the area as what? There would be formation of region. Now you tell me, can I say what could be these centrifugal forces? So can I say these centrifugal forces would be essentially any such phenomena which is creating a feeling of unity among people. Okay? So centripetal, if you talk about, it would be any such phenomena which creates a feeling of unity. Of unity among people. Feeling of unity among the people. Okay? So that is what we call it as the centripetal forces. Now for example, if we just take, can we say India is a cultural region? All of India is a cultural region. Indic culture we find in India. Now, if I look into India, can I say one factor which is very important and which plays an important role in the unification, which is a very important centripetal force? Can I say it is climate? All of India has which type of climate? Monsoon climate. As a result of this monsoon climate, what we find? There are various things which are common to the people. Like for example, एक example मैंने दिया था मकर संक्रांति. All over India it is celebrated. in different names. ठीक है, whether it is northeast, whether it is south, whether it is Punjab, everywhere in India it is essentially celebrated. And it becomes what? It becomes a culture, part of the culture, this festival. And who is giving this cultural trait? How it arises? It is essentially result of the factor of climate. So the climate plays what? A very dominant role. Here it plays a role of centripetal force. Like we said, अभी हमने एक word use किया, Islamic Riyam. ठीक है, Islamic Riyam, what is the very important, what are the centripetal forces which are there? Very clearly the centripetal force is essentially the factor of religion. But not only religion, you tell me, can I say physiography is another factor? It is essentially the dry belt of the world. It is the dry region. Okay? So when we are describing these cultural regions, essentially what we are doing, we have to talk about such centripetal and centrifugal forces. Okay? Like for example, अभी देखेंगे, we'll use this centripetal and centrifugal forces concept and we'll talk about that. Okay, so this is the topic which we didn't do in during the perspectives topic. Cultural regions. Culture refers to the sum total of all the living practices. It is simply a way of life, or what Vidal defines as genre divine. It is sum total of specialized behavioral social patterns, understandings, adaptations and social systems that summarize or give identity to group of people. That is what we simply call it as the culture. Cultural realm or region, realm here is region, is a geographical region where cultural traits maintain homogeneity. Here, the cultural traits have evolved with unique regional geographical circumstances. ये शीट पहले मिली है तुम्हें पर्सपेक्टिव्स इन ह्यूमन ज्योग्राफी में 8. So, cultural realm is a geographical region where cultural traits maintain homogeneity. Here, the cultural traits have evolved with the unique regional geographical circumstances. It is thus a region airily defined on the criteria of culture. Cultural area has, अभी जो हमने बात किया, this type of situation. Centripetal forces are greater than the centrifugal forces. Now, concept of cultural region can be traced back to the concept of cultural landscape, a concept used by Ratzel in his Anthropogeography 2. Then it was Schluter also used the concept, हमने देखा है, culture landschaft. We are talking of transformation of Landschaft to culture landschaft. The concept found most elaborative expression in the Berkeley School of Karl Swyer, where he tried to show processes through which this transformation of natural landscape occurs into a cultural landscape. Swyer, in his work Morphology of Landscape, describes the physical and social processes which ultimately become the basis of formation of cultural landscape, similar to the concept of pays of Vidal. Pays were cultural regions of France which Vidal had described. Thus, realms in essence are macro conceptualization of the concept of place. Culture is sum total of living. So we will define number of characters of the cultural realm. So centripetal or integrating factors can be there. Several of them can be there. Like there can be social factors of religion, language, architecture, dressing style, cuisines. Demographic factors, population density, fertility rates, status of women, literacy rates, several things. Economic factors, all of the things that we talked about. These would be the main criteria which would provide the integrating force. ठीक है, इंक्लूडिंग यहाँ पर लिखा नहीं हुआ, फिजियोग्राफी भी हो सकता है. सो ऑन द अदर हैंड सेंट्रिफ्यूगल फोर्सेस और डिवाइसिव फोर्सेस, यू टेल मी, कैन आई से यही सारी फोर्सेस विच वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट, कैन दे ऑल्सो एट प्लेसेस बिकम योर डिवाइसिव फैक्टर्स? कैन वी से दैट? अभी हमने इस्लामिक रियाम की बात की. नाउ विद इन द इस्लामिक रियाम we can divide the areas which are speaking Arabic, areas which are speaking Persian. ठीक है? So within the Islamic realm, can I say that there is the language plays as a very dominant centrifugal force, due to which this region can be divided into sub-regions? Can we say that? Essentially this is the case of the Islamic realm. So the same forces, sometimes they can become centripetal, at other times they can behave as the centrifugal forces. ठीक है? As a result of which there can be even presence of smaller regions, sub-regions within that. Ethnicity emerges when a particular group of people or people associate themselves with an area and cultural tendencies. ठीक है? सो द वर्ड एथनिसिटी, एथनिसिटी का मतलब क्या होता है? सिंपल, अगर सिंपल वर्ड्स में बोलूं, कल्चर इज अ सोशियोलॉजिकल कंसेप्ट, एथनिसिटी इज अ ज्योग्राफिकल वर्जन ऑफ कल्चर. ठीक है? इट इज द ज्योग्राफिकल वर्जन ऑफ द टर्म कल्चर. सो दैट मीन्स ethnicity is essentially what? Culture plus location is ethnicity. Now world cultural regions की बात करें, यहाँ पर लिखा हुआ है ब्रोक लिखा हुआ है, इसको ई बना लो. It is Brock Web. Divided the world into 4 major and 2 minor cultural realms. And there were number of them: major, Occidental, Islamic, Indian and East Asian realm. Some minor were there like Southeast Asian, Meso-African. These are also minor realms which are present. अब फटाफट देखते हैं. It is scale का difference होता है. Realm is a bigger version of region. ठीक है? So Islamic realm की बात करें, number of the characteristics you can simply understand. What is the, अगर मुझे इसको describe करना है तो I would describe it number of things. Like for example, Islamic realm. What are the integrating factors in the Islamic realm? Integration, can I say, starts with this characteristic? Arid, semi-arid. Islamic realm is essentially located in the arid, semi-arid region. Arid, semi-arid region, which is physically distinct from its surrounding. So first factor of integration is essentially provided by the physiography of this area. ठीक है? Another important integrating element is very clearly the factor of religion. And again, it is what? It is the factor of Islam. Islam is the binding force, more powerful binding force than the physiography. Although physiography also is very important. But Islam is the most important binding force. Islam originated as the last from the Semitic earth and remained confined and diffused from here to North Africa. There is development of distinct ethnicity in this cultural region. अब मुझे अगर इसको डिस्क्राइब करना है इस्लामिक रियाम, यू नो सो मेनी थिंग्स वी कैन कीप ऑन टॉकिंग अबाउट. So essentially, what are the areas which are included as a part of Islamic Riyam? One important area is the Middle East. Another very, very important area, can I say, is North Africa. North Africa. And this extends into, can I say, part of South Asia. Parts of South Asia. So that is one very dominant characteristic of this area. First, where it is found, the Islamic Riyam. Then if you talk about several characteristics we find of this Islamic Riyam, here the mode of life is determined by what? It is determined by religion. And it is essentially Islam. Religion is essentially Islam. Now, in this, number of aspects are provided. Like for example, you take the case of other things, like if we look into the factor of architecture. So what is essentially the architecture here? It is, we call it as the Islamic architecture. Islamic architecture. And in Islamic architecture, special features like presence of minarets. Minarets would be very, very common thing. Others like, if you talk about water fountains, ठीक है, tombs, all those things you can keep on going. Walled landscapes, all of these are part and parcel of the Islamic architecture. Similarly, there is dressing sense, so use of turbans, very common. Women basically what they do, they wear features like burqa, or what in many of these countries is referred to as hijab. Okay. So again, why this type of cultural trait? It has emerged from the geography, which is essentially what? It is a desert. So to protect their eyes, protect their bodies so that sand doesn't enter, they are forced to cover their bodies, faces. So that is another very important aspect. Other things you take, like for example, if you talk about the food or the food habits, they emerge from their occupation. Agriculture is not an important activity here. When I am saying agriculture, I essentially mean cropping. Cropping is not a very important aspect here. There is some cropping, like for example, dates are very, very common. Some type of crops are grown here. But it is, if you talk about different types. So food habit is dominantly what? It is dominantly, there is non-vegetarian culture, non-vegetarian culture. This area is very famous for its non-vegetarian, including vegetarian cuisines. Highly famous for the vegetarian, non-vegetarian cuisines. Now again you can understand ऐसा क्यों है, because this area cropping is not very important. This area is mostly which type of economy has been traditionally, it is pastoralist economy. Pastoralist economy. ठीक है. So again there is this type of status. Then economic characteristic. Traditionally this area was pastoral economy. Area has a pastoral economy. Had in fact pastoral economy. So that was very important binding force. But this area has seen what? Rise of economic status. Associated with discovery of oil and natural gas. Discovery of oil and natural gas. ठीक है. So that is a very important characteristic of this area. So now what we find, number of aspects are there. Very rich people present here, but there is high income disparity. High income disparity is found. ठीक है. Other aspects of social, still there is a more orthodox society where influence of religion is strong. Influence of religion is still strong. If you talk about the status of women, status of women is very low. As we said before, it is result of the fact that this area was very harsh, and in harsh area the survivors would be more men rather than women, as a result of which women are seen with contempt, because their ability to cope with such type of harsh areas historically would be what? Historically would have been lesser. So again the status of women is very low. So abhi recent mein you must have heard Saudi Arabia allowed women to drive, and it became a very very big news. Okay? So again that is the aspect of the social life that is there found in this area. So this is the case of the Islamic realm. Here also you will be finding this realm is slowly, or we can say also very fast changing. और भी चीजें इसमें हम जा सकते थे, like we could have gone into the demography, like अगर और भी चीजें बताएं, political aspect. So can I say here there is presence of, in fact, what we call them as sheikdoms. Sheikdoms, like kingdoms की तरह होते हैं sheikdoms. ठीक है. So there is presence of what? Authoritative regimes. Authoritative regimes. That means there is absence of democracy. Absence of democracy in this area. ठीक है. So that is the political aspect, demography, we still find that हमने देखा है TFR is high in this area. ठीक है, this area is experiencing what fast population growth because fertility still remains high, but because of the economic development mortality has declined. Although social development has lagged, as a result of which the fertility is still higher. ठीक है, so all these are the basic aspects which you will be describing about the Islamic realm. ठीक है, तो समझ में आ गया कि डिस्क्रिप्शन कैसे करना है of the cultural regions. This is the aspect of cultural regions. These are any cultural region, including the Islamic realm, is fast undergoing transformations. Like for example, so transformations, हमने देखा economic transformations are taking place. Now they are trying to convert their economy, reduce their dependence on the oil and gas. ठीक है, here also you will be finding the use of information technology etc. has provided what? Lots of information to the people. ठीक है, some of the Western cultural impacts can be very clearly seen even in this area. ठीक है, so that is basically what, that is the case of the Islamic realm. So बहुत easy होता है इस topic को करना. You just should know, or you can know that there is how to write, which are the names. Like for example, अगर एग्जाम में आ जाता है Occidental. So Occidental सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम क्या होगी? That you don't know what is Occidental. The term. Once you know, it would be easy. Like for example, Occidental includes Europe, Anglo-America. It is the Christian cultures of the world. Latin America, Soviet Russia, all of these are the Occidental. Widespread because no earth is there. यहाँ पे नो नहीं होना चाहिए. It is widespread because यहाँ पर होना चाहिए because it has spread to newer land from the earth. It has spread from newer land, spread to newer lands from its earth with integrating theme of Christianity. With the integrating theme of Christianity. ठीक है, so अगर इसमें देखें तो there are 4 divisions based on the type of culture which is present. और ये 4 divisions कौन कौन सी हैं? One is the West European culture. Other is the Mediterranean culture. Other is the Soviet, and the other one is the Latin American culture. Latin American culture. So 4 broad divisions within this Occidental realm can be seen. अब वेस्ट यूरोपियन के अंदर ही कैन आई से एंग्लो अमेरिका भी इसी का पार्ट एंड पार्सल होगा? कैन वी से दैट? एंग्लो अमेरिका वुड बी पार्ट एंड पार्सल ऑफ दिस सेम बिकॉज देयर इज हार्डली एनी डिफरेंस बिटवीन द वेस्ट यूरोप एंड द एंग्लो अमेरिका. द कल्चर इज वेरी मच सिमिलर. Mediterranean cultures are also similar. The difference is that Mediterranean has a different climatic conditions. As a result of these different climatic conditions, it has given rise to a different way of life. It has given rise to a different form of agriculture. It has given rise to a different level of urbanization. It has given rise to every aspect. It is what? It is different. ठीक है? सोवियत, इट इज मोर, इन दोनों की अगर हम बात करें वेस्ट यूरोपियन मेडिटेरियन, दे आर बोथ कैपिटलिस्टिक ओरिएंटेड कल्चर्स. ऑन द अदर हैंड सोवियत इज बेसिकली व्हाट? इट इज सोशलिस्टिक ओरिएंटेड और कम्युनिस्ट ओरिएंटेड कल्चर्स आर फाउंड इन सोवियत. हियर द climatic conditions are more harsh, they are different, here you will be finding that the population density is very low. ठीक है, here you will be finding economic diversification is limited. ठीक है, there is economic development, high economic development, but diversification of the economy is basically what? It is very, very limited. So again, that is basically the case of the Soviet. Latin America, हमने देखा है underpopulated area. Here also Catholic Christianity is the dominant form of Christianity. Language which is spoken here, it is the Iberian Peninsula languages, Spanish and Portuguese, which is again an integrating factor in this area. ठीक है, so that is basically what, that is essentially the case of these areas. अब इसमें भी मैं और भी चीजों में जा सकता था, अगर मैं सपोज आर्किटेक्चर को उठा लूं. So here what we find, architecture is now dominated by presence of skyscrapers, for example, West Europe and North America. It is a common feature that is to be found. In Mediterranean, it is less like that. Mediterranean region, you will be finding that it is the architecture is where the physical sprawl is, or the horizontal sprawl is the more greater than the vertical sprawl. So here the architecture, there is a distinct, in fact, Mediterranean architecture is found here. ठीक है, और भी चीजों में डिस्क्राइब कर सकते थे, इकोनॉमिक टर्म्स में डिस्क्राइब कर सकते थे. लाइक व्हेन यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट वेस्ट यूरोपियन, it is more industrial and urbanized landscape. On the other hand, when you are talking about Mediterranean, what we find, Mediterranean is more of a, which type? Mediterranean is more agrarian based economy. Industries are more what? They are agro based industries are more common. Soviet, if you talk about, it is again what? It is highly urbanized and industrialized landscape. It is based upon more of what? Heavy sector industries. Heavy industries. Similarly, if you talk about the case of Latin America, it is what? It is also a more developing characteristic. It is not so much industrialized. It is based upon agriculture. Particularly here you will be finding that plantation agriculture is the dominant form. Whether it is related with coffee plantations, whether it is related with opium plantations, whether it is related with the others like sugar plantations. Plantation is the dominant mode. In recent times there is growth of rubber plantations. ठीक है, अब वेस्ट यूरोपियन और मेडिटेरियन में और फर्क क्या है? वेस्ट यूरोपियन इज मोर प्रोटेस्टेंट ओरिएंटेड क्रिश्चियनिटी, while if you talk about the Mediterranean, it is what? It is a more Catholic oriented Christianity. So that is another difference between them. ठीक है, so कुछ चीजें इसमें ऐसे करके लिखी हुई हैं. Then if you talk about Indic culture, development of mixture of races, Hinduism is essentially what? It is the most important common integrating factor. So Supreme Court has observed that Hinduism is essentially a way of life. ठीक है, if you have to describe Hinduism, it is essentially what? It is a way of life. It is a culture. More than religion, it is what? It is a culture. Because many of the factors, you cannot say that what are present in the Hindu religion, they actually have come from the Hindu religion. In Hinduism, you will find that there used to be the Ghungat system. Actually, it was manifestation of what? The Parda system, which was brought by the Islamic rulers. Several of the characteristics हमने देखा था कल have been brought into the present culture from time immemorial, from the ancient times. Various cultures have combined together to create this specific way of living, that is basically the Hinduism. ठीक है, so that is the aspect of Hinduism. अब हिंदुइज्म में भी हम उसको अलग अलग रीजन्स में भी डिवाइड करेंगे. विल सी व्हाट इज द डिवीजन फर्दर. ऑन द अदर हैंड, अगर हम दूसरे की बात करें, साउथ ईस्ट एशियन रीजन, So Southeast Asian region is basically what? East Asian and Southeast Asian included among them are both. So here the integrating factor is what? It is Buddhism. Another important integrating factor is the presence of Mongoloid race. It is basically Mongoloid racial stock. The area is distinct because it is a transition between Indic and the East Asian cultures, that is the Chinese culture. Presence of Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism etc. can be found together. ये सभी यहाँ पर मिलते हैं. So इसके लिए एक बड़ा टर्म यूज किया जाता है एंड वी कॉल इट एज द ओरिएंटल रियाम. सो ओरिएंटल रियाम के अंदर कौन कौन से आते हैं? इंडिक, ईस्ट एशियन एंड साउथ ईस्ट एशियन एरियाज. व्हाट इज द इंटीग्रेटिंग फैक्टर इन द ओरिएंटल रियाम? क्या हो सकता है? The main integrating factor is the monsoonal climate. There is also a type of monsoonal climate in East Asia. Southeast Asia में तो है ही है. Even in East Asia there is a kind of monsoonal climate. याद है हमने बात किया था China type. It is the subtropical monsoonal climate. ठीक है. And very importantly, these areas are connected by being one type of characteristic is agrarian economies. And very importantly, you'll be finding in all these areas one crop which is one of the most important staple crop. It is rice. Rice is one of the most important staple crop which is grown in all of these three regions. So that culture of rice is what? It is common characteristic in this area. Okay? Which makes it what? Some having unified characteristics. Also you will be finding other characteristics like for example Buddhism is one of the unifying characteristics. Although not now dominant in India, can I say हमने देखा है Buddhism actually came out from the Hinduism. ठीक है. So you will be finding जैसे Hinduism में you know there are a number of yoga or way of achieving God. So among them all the highest is considered as the Raj Yoga. ठीक है. So Raj Yoga is essentially what? It is about the individual, your own self individual. You become one with the God. So how? You meditate and ultimately become one with the God under the concept of Raj Yoga. Karma Yoga, you do your work and again you become one with the God. Bhakti Yoga. So 4 yogas, you know, there are 4 yogas. Among them, Raj Yoga is considered as the highest. Now, if you look into Buddhism, can I say Buddhism has got motivation from this Raj Yoga only? Buddhism is also about what? The meditation. Becoming one with yourself, that is God. Okay? So many of the aspects which are there in Buddhism, actually they have come from where? They have come from Hinduism. Okay? So the religion is what? It is one of the integrating forces which are there in this region. Okay? So that is basically what? That is the case of the Oriental realm. So it is also other factors like these were the areas which were developed in ancient times. So there is presence of what? There is presence of very old civilizations. Civilizations have flourished in this area. So as a result of which what will happen? You tell me, will there be similarities in demography? Demography में similarities हो सकता है? Come on यार, similarities हैं. We find that, can I say, this area is very dense populated area of the world. In fact, we can say most densely populated region of the world. हमने देखा था 3 ही region को हमने high density category में रखा था, याद है? South Asia, East Asia and Southeast Asia. ठीक है. So this area is characterized by what? High population density is important characteristic of this region. ठीक है. So that is essentially referred to as the Oriental realm. Similarly, you can understand Meso of Africa. Important element is that of race. Africa, it is what? It is Negroid race. What is the characteristics of Africa? Very underdeveloped, very primitive, still primitive economies in many of this part of Africa. They still not have reached the takeoff stage in majority of the cases of Africa. Beside, if you talk about Africa, several other characteristics: presence of tribal culture, forest-based economies. If you talk about agriculture, cereals which are most popular in the world are not grown here. It has a totally different type of its own agriculture. Like cocoa, for example, is a very, very important crop. Palm is another very, very important crop in Africa. So various other different type of agriculture. Here you will be finding that pastoralism is equally what? It is equally significant activity in case of Africa. Okay? Overall, you will be finding that in Africa, other political aspects, there is presence of what? Less developed and stable political systems. Many cases, political systems are what? They are just authoritative in nature. Okay? Also, you will be finding other problems like this area is highly troubled area, extreme level of poverty is found. Also, there are political conflicts which are ongoing. हमने 3 areas में देखे हैं बड़े बड़े political conflict जहाँ हो रहे हैं, West Africa, Horn of Africa and Central Africa. 3 areas, if you remember, we have seen. So that is basically the case of Meso Africa. Other important characteristic of Meso Africa is what? Actually, there was presence of animist cultures where they were worshipping the nature before. But later this area was what? Colonized by the Europeans. And today, if you talk about this Meso Africa, it is characterized by what? It is mainly south of Sahara region. So this area is very clearly dominated by Christianity. Here both the type of Christianity has made its penetration, including the Catholic as well as the Protestants. Both of them. ठीक है? डेमोग्राफी में हमने इतनी सारी चीजें देखी अफ्रीका में. मेजॉरिटी ऑफ एरियाज आर व्हाट? अंडर पॉपुलेटेड. मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द कंट्रीज आर essentially underpopulated countries in case of Africa. ठीक है? तो इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें लिखी हैं. ट्रांजिशन जोन, ट्राइबल कल्चर, प्रिमिटिव इकोनॉमिक, कन्वर्टेड क्रिश्चियंस. Overall, people adhere to both faiths of tribe and Christianity. Famines are common, tribal wars are common. ठीक है? High diversity of language is found in this area. Tribal cultural diversity is found in this area. ठीक है? So, यहाँ पर देखो लिखा हुआ अर्लियर एक पोलर रियाम, एस्किमो रियाम भी होता था. But today there is no such Eskimo realm which is left, because Eskimo realm has merged with what? It has merged with the Occidental realm. Okay? It has totally merged with Occidental realm. Now their way of life is same as the Occidental realm life. Okay? I think I told you there was one incident. There was one researcher, Mayo, and Mayo was given Nobel Prize for his research. He and his associates were able to come up with several marketing strategies, and one of the attempts what they did, they essentially sold fridge to Eskimo. वहाँ पे जरूरत क्या है? Essentially their culture had changed totally. ठीक है? So that is basically the case of this cultural region. Now coming to India's cultural regions of India. Cultural regions of India. एक क्वेश्चन लिखते हैं. Formulate a suitable criteria. Formulate a suitable criteria for division of India into cultural regions. I'll give you 2-3 minutes. Think what can be such criteria. इसमें एक और टर्म ऐड कर लेते हैं, एंड एक्सप्लेन द characteristics of such regions. Okay, what can be the criteria for division of India into cultural regions? So, language, फिजियोग्राफी, और भी कुछ हो सकता है, इकोनॉमी, religion. Think again. Religion can be there. Okay. डिफ्यूजन ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन इकोनॉमी के अंदर आ जाएगा. और बताओ. फूड हैबिट्स. ओके, फूड हैबिट्स कैन वी कैन टॉक अबाउट. ओके, इतनी सारी चीजें हैं. कैन आई से आई कैन कंबाइन ऑल ऑफ देम एंड आई कैन से द क्राइटेरिया, बेस्ट क्राइटेरिया कैन बी एथनिसिटी. Best criteria can be the ethnicity criteria, and ethnicity criteria includes what? अभी हमने बोला था culture plus geography, physiography. So here, because many the characteristics that we are talking about, they cannot be quantified. ठीक है, these characteristics you cannot quantify them. As a result of which, what you can do here is you can just take them and cluster. Using the cluster approach, what we can do, we can combine all of them and we can convert them into the factor of ethnicity. So ethnicity would include what? It would include the physiography, it would include language, it would include the economic practice, it would include the other modes of cultural life. ठीक है, अभी देखते हैं. सो इसमें एक दो लाइनें लिखो. culture is multi-dimensional. Culture is multi-dimensional, which is difficult to be described by any single criteria. Any single criteria. Full stop. It essentially is a way of life. Is a way of life which includes economic, social, political characteristics of a particular area. Full stop. Thus, to capture the essence of culture, full stop, the essence of culture, comma, the criteria to demarcate India into cultural regions. Cultural regions should be based upon multiple criteria. Multiple criteria rather than on single criteria. Rather than on single criteria. Full stop. Change the paragraph. Single criteria regionalizations have been frequently advocated. Like, for example, on the basis of language. Full stop. However, there is too much of linguistic diversity in India. Too much of linguistic diversity in India. Which makes it difficult to identify such cultural regions. Full stop. Also, division of cultural regions just on the basis of language. Cultural regions just on the basis of language neglects other dimensions of culture which can play integrating or disintegrating roles. Integrating or disintegrating roles. ठीक है. For example, Eastern India has presence of various languages, including Bhojpuri Hindi, Bengali, Odia, etc. Full stop. Despite this diversity, there is a connecting link which is found in the fish rice culture. Fish rice culture in this area. फिश राइस कल्चर इन दिस एरिया. ठीक है, जिसको हम बोलते हैं माछ भात कल्चर. So again, here what we find, that there is this integrating link. And how this integrating link comes? This is the humid monsoonal region. In this humid monsoonal region, it is located in the plains. So physiographically, there is very similar characteristics are present. Such similar characteristics have given rise to which type of agriculture here? Intensive subsistence tillage with rice dominance, which becomes the integrating factor of this area. Very high population density is another integrating factor of this area. So there are several factors which make this area as what? Make this area as one singular region. Okay? So when we are talking about culture, we should try to capture the whole essence of culture, which is what? Which is multi-dimensionality. And that is why a single criteria based classification of culture is not a better way of describing the cultural regions. It should be what? It should be based upon multiple criteria, which should include factors like physiography, other social practices, economic practices, political aspects. All of these should be included as a part of this culture. So on the basis of this, if we talk about India, can be divided into number of cultural regions. Number of cultural regions on the basis of the criteria of ethnicity. First important cultural region is the Western Himalayan. Western Himalayan cultural region. Clearly you can understand इसमें कौन कौन से states आ जाएंगे? जम्मू एंड कश्मीर, हिमाचल प्रदेश and Uttarakhand. Now, what is the main integrating force here? The main integrating force here is what? It is the physiography. Physiography is the most important integrating force. And if you talk about how it is very important integrating force, like for example, here you will be finding mountainous topography, which has led to development of the hill cultures. So physiography is one important integrating force. There are other integrating forces also. You tell me, can I say this belt, can it be described as the horticulture belt? It is essentially the horticulture belt of India. So agriculture, if you talk about, it is a specific particular type of agriculture which is being practiced here. Okay? So this is these are some of the main integrating forces which are found in this area. ठीक है? रेस थोड़ा सा डिवाइसिव हो जाता है, ऑल्दो यू कैन से रेस भी एक फैक्टर लिख सकते हैं, बिकॉज दैट डिवीजन इज ओनली एट पर्टिकुलर इन कश्मीर फॉर एग्जाम्पल. सो इफ यू टॉक अबाउट कश्मीर, it is a mixed race between the Mongoloids and the Caucasoids. ठीक है, more oriented towards the Caucasoids. That is the Nordics जो हमने देखा था, Aryans. ठीक है, but race is, there is a common Mongoloid traits which are there. And हमने देखा है which Mongoloids? Tibeto-Mongoloids. Tibeto-Mongoloids. So there is integrating force here in this area. But in this area you will also be finding that there is disintegrating forces. सो डिसइंटीग्रेटिंग फोर्स में कौन कौन सा आता है? मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट, वन ऑफ द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट डिसइंटीग्रेटिंग फोर्स इज रिलीजन, ठीक है। इसमें और भी इंटीग्रेटिंग फोर्स लिख सकते थे, लैंग्वेज एक इंटीग्रेटिंग फोर्स है, देखा था हमने अगर याद हो, पहाड़ी देन कश्मीरी, they have evolved from a common language, that is Hindi, ठीक है। Now disintegrating force, religion, very clearly three main religions are there: Hinduism, Buddhism and Islam. So very clearly we can divide this area into, like for example, if I suppose have to talk about this area. So this is this cultural realm which we are talking about. Very clearly we find that there are three main belts. This area belongs to Islam. This is essentially the Hinduism belt. And if you talk about these interior Himalayas, is related with Buddhism culture. ठीक है। सो अगर हमें डिवाइड करना होगा मेजॉरिटी के टर्म्स में, सो वी विल बी फाइंडिंग दैट वी कैन डिवाइड दिस एरिया इनटू थ्री such type of sub regions. So here religion is what? It is a very important force which is behaving as a centrifugal force of the area. ठीक है। So that is the case of the western Himalayan region. Then comes the northern region. So included within the northern regions are states of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. In fact, the Uttar Pradesh which is included here is the western Uttar Pradesh, western UP, and parts of Rajasthan. So if we talk about the northern region, what is the first important integrating forces? Factors. What are the integrating factors here? Most important integrating factor is the factor of language. Language. In fact, language मत लिखो अभी, एक मिनट रुक जाओ. लैंग्वेज से पहले ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ें लिखते हैं. लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल हियर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इंटीग्रेटिंग फोर्स इज दैट इट इज द हैविंग सब ट्रॉपिकल मॉनसूनल क्लाइमेट, सब ट्रॉपिकल मॉनसून क्लाइमेट. सो यहाँ पर विंटर में भी देयर इज रेनफॉल रिसीव्ड फ्रॉम द वेस्टर्न डिस्टर्बेंसेस. So it is what? It is a subtropical monsoonal climate, and this area can be rightly described as the wheat belt of the country. Very importantly, this is what? Wheat growing area of the country. So very importantly, if you talk about integrating force is received from this agrarian characteristic of this region. Overall, this area has what? Which type of agriculture is being practiced today? It is extensive agricultural practices. More, there is extensive agricultural practice. ठीक है? Similarly, if you talk about others, other factors are also behaving as the integrating factor in this region. One very important factor, if you talk about, which is playing other important factor, is the plain characteristic, the topography. Topography is another very dominant factor. Okay? So there are several integrating factors which are found in this region. Others भी हैं थोड़ा यहाँ पर. There is also race as a very important factor. This area is inhabited by the Nordics. There is dominance of the Nordics race mixed with Mediterraneans. Mixed with the Mediterraneans. There is also other factor which is playing role, level of development. Level of development. It is another factor which is playing very important role. In one way, language is also playing very important role. It is essentially the Hindi belt. Although there is emergence of language like Punjabi, but Punjabi has actually emerged from what? It has emerged from Hindi. Okay? So that is why you will find कि you listen to Punjabi songs, at least 50% तो समझ में आ जाता है. It is not so much of a problem. Okay? Because there is lots of similarities between Hindi and Punjabi. Okay? So it also behaves as what? The language is also an integrating force in this area. But there are disintegrating forces. Disintegrating forces. One important disintegrating force is religion. Religion. So here you can very clearly understand there is presence of Sikhism. For example, there is presence of Sikhism. So if you talk about Sikhism, can we say we have seen movements like Khalistan, a kind of separatist movement. Okay? So there are some disintegrating factors. Most important among them is the factor of religion. Okay? So this is the case of northern region. Then comes the third region of India, cultural region, eastern region. Eastern region. Eastern region में कौन कौन सा आएंगे? Eastern Uttar Pradesh, Eastern Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, and some parts of Odisha, the coastal, particularly the coastal Odisha, parts of Odisha. These are the part and parcel of the eastern region. अब eastern region की बात करें, what are the integrating factors? Integrating factors, it starts with that it is humid monsoon regime. It is essentially a humid monsoon regime. This humid monsoon regime has given rise to what? It has given rise to rice and fish culture. Rice and fish culture is the dominant form. Rice is the staple crop of this area. Fishes, aquaculture, it is common along with rice growing. क्योंकि यहाँ पर transplantation method use होता है. In that transplantation, they fill the fields with water. And what they do? These fields are also used for aquaculture. Okay? So again, this is very dominant aspect. So here the agricultural system is what? It is intensive subsistence with rice dominance. With rice dominance culture. Other integrating forces are found in the demography. Here population density is high. High population density is found. Other very important characteristics which are present here in this area, you tell me. So many. Agriculture में चला जाऊँ तो और भी चीजें हैं. What is the average size of land holdings? It is small to marginal it is even. ठीक है. So what we are trying to simply say, there is extreme level of poverty. This area is very, very famous for high level of poverty. ठीक है. Also हमने देखा है another important integrating force here is what? It is the force of language, linguistic force. There is connection between Bhojpuri, Bengali and Odia. They are all interconnected to each other. So that is the main integrating forces which are there. But there is also presence of what? Now disintegrating. You tell me, can I say disintegrating factors? Some of these factors are there, like for example, one important integrating factor itself becomes actually language. So there is what? There is dissimilarity between Bhojpuri, Bengali and Odia. So distinct regions of Bhojpuri, which is associated with Bihar, Eastern UP, it is Bhojpuri. Bengali with the West Bengal and Odia with the Odisha region can be identified. ठीक है. There is link. यहाँ पर हमने बोला there is link, connection है. इसीलिए मैंने उसको last point लिखवाया. पहले भी लिखवा सकता था. ठीक है. But language actually में क्या कर रहा है? 3 अलग अलग areas बना रहा है. And again because of that there is diversive forces are present in this area. Okay? So that is basically the main distinct, if you talk about divisive force which is present in this area. So eastern belt हो गया. North eastern belt की बात करते हैं. Northeastern belt. So if you talk about northeastern belt, what are the integrating forces or factors? So what is the most important integrating factor? Socho. Is it physiography? No. Northeast is the microcosm of India. Like India has so much of physiographic diversity, Northeast also has high physiographic diversity. Have we seen that in Northeast there is Himalayas? Have we seen that in Northeast there is plains? Have we seen that in Northeast there is the plateau? Okay? So no physiographic diversity. Physiography is not an integrating factor. Topography particularly not. ठीक है. क्लाइमेट कह सकते हो फिजियोग्राफी का एक पार्ट इंटीग्रेटिंग है. climate is one thing which we can say is integrating, but टोपोग्राफी नहीं. और क्लाइमेट को बाद में लिखो. जो सबसे पहले इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है सबसे पहले आनी चाहिए. सो if you talk about one of the very very dominant factor is the race, and here we find what there is presence of mongoloid race. And which mongoloid race is dominant? Paleo mongoloid. Paleo mongoloid race. What is other integrating force? It is tribal culture. So that means the economy is essentially which type? It is primitive. It is primitive economy which is found here. There are some other integrating forces, like for example the case of language. We have seen that the language which is spoken here, it belongs to which group? Sino-Tibetan. Sino-Tibetan group of languages are spoken here. Okay? So language is also what? A kind of integrating factor in this area. What are other integrating factors? One important integrating factor is geographical isolation and underdevelopment. Geographical isolation and underdevelopment. ठीक है. Others और भी बहुत सारे हैं. Like for example, there is development of bamboo culture. Bamboo culture here. Bamboo is like way of life यहाँ पर. It is the most easily, readily available resource of this area. It is a humid area. Bamboo is extensively growing in this region. So घर बनाने के लिए भी bamboo. They also are cooking many dishes from bamboo. ठीक है. So you might have seen, sometimes I used to live North Delhi. So there are so many people coming from Northeast are staying. Sometimes they cook bamboo and it is very bad smell. Very, very bad smell. Sometimes they used to cook. So, but that is what? That is, they are also cooking food out of bamboo. So, it is referred to as the bamboo culture. जैसे अभी हमने rice culture की बात की, there is bamboo culture which is there in the northeastern India. So, all these factors are what? These are the integrative forces which are connecting the northeastern India. Disintegrating force or factor, most important अभी हमने बात किया, one factor is topography. So we find that there is mountainous, plain and plateau. All these topographies are present here. Other important disintegrating factor if you talk about is the factor of religion. There are areas which are dominantly Christian. There are areas which are dominantly Buddhist, for example. There are areas which are more dominantly Hindu. Like Assam, if you talk about, more dominated by Hindu. If you talk about Nagaland, Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram, these are more dominated by Christianity. If you talk about Arunachal Pradesh, it is more Buddhist dominant culture which is there. ठीक है. So there are disintegrative factors which are also creating division in this India. Then there is central India. Next region is the Central Indian region. Central Indian region. So what are the Central Indian region? हमने देखा ट्राइबल बेल्ट जो हमने बनाया था, that is basically part of this is the Central Indian region. So it starts from the Aravalli region, extends through the Vindhyas, Satpuras into ultimately the Chota Nagpur, Bastar, all those areas are part and parcel of that. Also the Telangana, all those are part and parcel of this Central Indian belt. Now, if you talk about this Central Indian belt, so very importantly, the integrating factors. One important integrating factor is the factor of race. So here you will be finding that this area is inhabited by Proto-Australoids. Proto-Australoids race is found here. There are other integrative factors here. Very clearly there is presence of tribal culture. That means it is having very primitive technology. It is which type of forest based economy? It is forest based economy. This is one important integrating force. Thus, अगर हम और बात करें इस एरिया की, very importantly this area physiography is another integrative force. So this area is what? It is hilly, mountainous, forested topography. Hilly, mountainous, mountainous बोल रहा हूँ, hilly, undulating, forested physiography which is found here. ठीक है? So that is basically the case of the these are the important, if you look into the integrating forces. What are the disintegrating forces? Important disintegrating forces, if you talk about, for example, is language is an important disintegrating force. For example, did we saw that here there are two families of languages which are spoken, main, उसमें भी आपस में divisions है, but Austronesian, Austroasiatic. Austronesian का एक ग्रुप था वो, Austronesian was bigger one ना, Austroasiatic, was one group of language which is spoken, but also there is Central Dravidian. Central Dravidian. ठीक है, 3 Dravidian देखे थे हमने. If you remember, Central Dravidian most important language was Gondi. ठीक है, so it is a different family of language. Thus, these tribal groups are different. They have different characteristics. So that is basically the case of the Central Indian region. Then another region is the Western Indian region. The Western Indian region. So Western Indian region में mainly कौन से आएंगे? महाराष्ट्र, गुजरात and parts of Rajasthan. So what is the integrating force? Integrating factors क्या हो सकते हैं इस एरिया के? Very importantly, the most important, in fact इसमें देखो mainly देखो महाराष्ट्र and गुजरात. Number of integrating factors are there. One important integrating factor is associated with the physiography. And physiography, very importantly, there is black cotton soil. Kathiawad also, देखा है हमने. Maharashtra plateau, there is the presence of black cotton soil which is present. That is one important integrating factor of this area. Another important integrating factor of this area is, you tell me, can I say that it is agriculture? What is integrating factor here in agriculture? Can I say this area is dominated by cultivation of commercial crop, cotton, commercial agriculture. So again, this is the case of the integration. Other integrating factor here is religion. This area is very clearly dominated by Hindu religion. So यहाँ पर हिंदुइज्म का कुछ ज़्यादा ही क्रेज है. Then other aspect is, can I say, level of development. This area, can I say, is more industrialized and urbanized. It is more industrialized and urbanized. So there are several integrating factors. What is the disintegrating factor? The main disintegrating factor is language. Okay? You can understand that language was the basis of division of Maharashtra and Gujarat. Earlier Gujarat was part of Maharashtra. Okay? Language became the basis for this division. So Gujarati and Marathi are two distinct languages, although they are related languages. They are related in the sense that they have developed from Hindi. Okay? They have evolved from Hindi, but very clearly they are there are differences in them. So the disintegrating factor, main disintegrating factor, is the factor of language. And the last region is the southern region. Southern region. So if you talk about southern region, integrating factor. What is the integrating factors? Can I say one important integrating factor of this region is very importantly race. Race is the most important integrating factor. Here there is presence of which race? It is Mediterranean. It is the Mediterranean race. Okay? There is other integrating force, and that is language. And if you talk about language, it is the South Dravidian. Other integrative force is religion, and this area is dominantly Hinduism dominated area. And again, Hinduism, when we are saying, it is a way of life. Many of the cultures have penetrated. Even if there is other religion present, they are followers of many of the aspects of Hinduism. Others, like for example, this area, you tell me, can I say there is similarities in terms of fooding habit? It is rice dominant. Rice dominant culture has evolved here. Other type of habits like dressing habits. So dressing is dominated by cotton clothes, particularly the case of lungi. Like for example, today it is less because we are becoming more westernized, but this culture of wearing lungi, it was common in this South Indian belt. Okay? So that is one. Then other factors like the social development. Very dominant factor is what? It is the level of social development. Social development level is higher in this area. ठीक है ना? Other integrating factors भी हैं. This area is dominantly tropical. It is dominantly tropical India. ठीक है? Also, much of it is not far away from sea, so we can call it as tropical humid. Tropical humid India. So this is the integrating factor of this region. But there are disintegrating factors also. What is the most important disintegrating factor? The disintegrating factor emerges from topography. Topographically, there are distinct regions. Like Telangana, coastal Andhra, Karnataka में मलनाड, मैदान, मालाबार, Tamil Nadu plateau. ठीक है? So there are distinct topographical units, and these topographical units have become basis of establishment of the nuclear cultures. ठीक है? Very importantly here, language also becomes the disintegrating factor. So language connecting link भी provide करता है, but it is also disconnecting link. So you'll find that it is easier for a person who is speaking Malayali to understand Tamil, because they are interrelated languages. Like हमें पंजाबी आसानी से समझ में आ जाती है. ठीक है? To them, their own languages, they would be more easy able to learn and understand. So there is a connecting link. But यहाँ पर इस area में very important thing is that language has superseded even God. The status of language is higher than that of religion. It is so much higher. And language actually is the basis of this culture region. So Tamil, so much emotional with the Tamil issue. ठीक है? सबसे ज्यादा दिखाई पड़ता है तमिल्स में. Then come the Kannada, Telugu and Malayali. ठीक है? But there is no doubt that language is the most important factor which creates division in this area into 4 parts. ठीक है? So उन छोटे parts में language is what? It is the most important integrating factor. ठीक है? So that is basically the case of southern region. So these are the cultural regions of India. अब देखो अलग अलग, क्योंकि इसका कोई फिक्स कंटेंट नहीं है. Some can take basis of cultural region also as language. ठीक है? That can also be taken as a basis. But उसमें too many divisions हो जाएंगे. When you are talking about the language, taking language as the criteria. And many times, like you take the case of Hindi language. ठीक है? Now when we are taking the case of Hindi language, can I say we will be classifying Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana as one? होगा या नहीं होगा? But अगर दोनों के cultures में जाएं, can I say that there is too much of difference? There is very, very big difference. What is there in Western UP, Haryana, and what is there in Eastern UP and Bihar? There is too much big difference. ठीक है? That is why single criteria classifications have their own limitations. So it is better to take what multiple criteria, because in terms of culture, the criteria chosen, they cannot be quantified. That is why we'll be using the clustering approach, and we'll simply call it as what the index we'll create is ethnicity index. And on the basis of that, we'll be dividing India into all of these type of regions. That is basically the cultural regions of India. Okay? Then एक और टॉपिक कर लेते हैं. कौन से? डिफरेंट है. अंडमान निकोबार आई कैन सिंपली टेक इट एज द पार्ट ऑफ द ट्राइबल कल्चर. Okay, so if you talk about we are going to talk about the tribal belts of India. Tribal belts of India. So B.S. Guha has identified number of tribal belts of India, like the North Himalayan belt, Northeastern belt, Central Indian belt, and the Southern belt. So he has identified 4 tribal areas of India. C.B. Memoria adds one more to this mix, and he adds Andaman and Nicobar belt. Andaman and Nicobar belt under this. So एक एक करके बात करते हैं फटाफट. नॉर्दर्न हिमालयन. So if we talk about the northern Himalayan belt, number of tribes are found here. In this area, the tribal is essentially associated with Mongoloid race. Here also, the tribal groups are essentially associated with Mongoloid races. Among these tribals, if you talk about the economy, if you talk about the economic practices, they range from primitive to more modern. Like for example, in the interior of Uttarakhand, there is a tribe which is known as Raji, R-A-J-I, Raji tribe. So Raji tribe of Uttarakhand is still involved in hunting and gathering. Hunting and gathering is important practice. Similarly, if you talk about, there are others like Bhuyas, Karwas in Uttarakhand, and they are basically what? They are practicing shifting agriculture. Others like Jharu, Jharus, Jarus, Kol, they are practicing settled agriculture. They are practicing settled agriculture practice. Others, like there are Gaddi and Bakarwal. Gaddis and Bakarwal. So Gaddi and Bakarwal are basically what? These are pastoralists. Their economy is based upon pastoralism. Okay? So all these Gaddis and Bakarwals are mainly located on the higher slopes of the Himalayas, in the interior and higher slopes of the Himalayas. So this is the basically the northern Himalayan belt. हमने देखा है here which race was there? It was Tibeto-Mongoloid race. ठीक है? And language spoken among them is the Sino-Tibetan language that we talked about. So that is the case of the northern Himalayan belt. Then there is the northeastern Himalayan belt. Northeastern Himalayan belt. One thing about the northern Himalayan belt is that this belt has seen relatively more, you can say, connectivity with the main population. This belt is experiencing changes very fast. Fast changes are seen in this belt, and many people, if you talk about that now, because Uttarakhand, etc., Himachal, etc., these are the states where the state governments have performed comparatively well. Okay? That means the extension of the services by the state government, whether it is the hospital services, whether it is, if you talk about school services, such type of services by the government has been better. And slowly, as a result of which, what is happening, there is better integration of these tribes into the main cultural system of India. Okay? So this area is undergoing a change. Although देखेंगे सबसे तेजी से change कहाँ पर हो रहा है? It is this India, Central Indian tribal belt. Here maximum, fastest change is taking place. But here also the winds of change are very clearly visible. Northeastern belt की बात करें, Northeastern belt, so many हमने जो languages देखे थे, all those are basically what the tribal groups. So very important characteristic here is what? That this area has dominance of Paleo-Mongoloid race. Dominance of the Paleo-Mongoloid race. But there is very high ethnic diversity in this area. Very high tribal diversity, in fact. Here also the economy ranges from number of things, like for example, hunting and gathering is still practiced by like Konyaks. It is a tribe in Assam, Arunachal. Then Kuki Nagas, Kuki Naga. So again, these are basically doing what? They are still practicing the hunting and gathering. Shifting cultivation, the Jhum cultivation, which is famously referred to as, is still practiced by Garo, Khasi, and some Naga groups. Okay? Today there is also settled agriculture, which is mostly very much developed in the form of terraced farming. And most developed it is where? In the Manipuri tribes, Methi tribal group. Also others have adapted, like Khasis are changing very fast to such type of cultivation. Okay? Very importantly, one important dominant influence in recent times in this belt is that this belt has become a Christianity dominated belt. These tribes have converted to Christianity. Now, as a result of this, here also what we find, the cultural change has been very palpable, very visible. So what is the type of cultural change that is taking place? Change in, for example, the language which is spoken. And what is the main common language which is people are learning? It is English. English language. Okay, so you might have seen people coming from northeast, they are well versed in English. Okay. Beside that, there is dominant influence of Western culture. Dominant influence of Western culture which is emerging here. Okay. So you might have seen many of, in fact, of when I was a student, many of our northeastern friends, they were like too much fond of English music, guitar bajana, all those type of culture is very clearly visible here. Okay. Several factors are there. Government is giving lots of subsidy. Government is allowing people to come to the mainland, study, subsidy, so many things. And because of that, this cultural change is very, very palpable. So that is the north characteristics of the northeastern belt. Other characteristics हमने देखे हैं, linguistic characteristics, वो सभी उसके part and parcel हैं. Central Indian belt की बात करें, Central Indian belt, it is the biggest tribal belt of India. Biggest tribal belt of India. We have seen that this tribal belt, there is dominance of proto-australoid racial stock. Proto-australoid racial stock. Okay. Now, if we talk about this Central Indian tribal belt, economy. So, number of tribes are involved in practice of hunting and gathering still. Primitive tribes are present which still practice hunting and gathering. Like for example, hunting and gathering वाले tribes की बात करें तो there is खरिया, कादर, ये सब झारखंड के tribes हैं mainly. Birhor, all these are tribes of Jharkhand. Then there are others like Hill Maria found in the Bastar region of Chhattisgarh, Hill Maria tribe. Then there is other tribe Juang in Odisha. All these are hunter and gatherer tribes. Then there is presence of shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation tribes में बहुत सारे हैं like खोंद of Odisha, Asur tribe of Jharkhand, Bihar, then Muria tribe of Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. So shifting cultivation. Now majority of the tribal groups have started to practice what? Settled agriculture. Settled agriculture. So if you talk about Munda, Ho, Oraon, these are very important tribal groups of this area. The major important tribal groups are now practicing settled agriculture. So Munda, Ho, Kuruk, Oraon, in Chhattisgarh, Bega. Okay? So all these are essentially what? These are the economic characteristics of this area. Very clearly, agriculture has dominant influence of forest-based economy. Okay? It is forest-based. Now, what is happening in this Central Indian tribal belt? Central Indian tribal belt is an area which has experienced maximum change. Maximum change. There are a number of reasons for this. Central Indian tribal belt, particularly the eastern tribal belt, it coincides with the mineral resource regions of India. It is very important, the mineral resource region. Starting from the British period, this region has seen forest rights being taken away. Britishers wanted to exploit the forest resources of India. So what they did, they took the forest rights of these tribal groups. After independence, they have experienced the problem of land alienation. Problem of land alienation. ठीक है? So various ways में ये land alienation हो जाता है. Like for example, government is developing mining areas and government will say we'll give you compensation, but they don't have the documents, so they cannot get compensation. Other ways, there is encroachment of outsiders into this area because there are so many resources. Many ways they do. Like for example, sometimes threat, sometimes gifts, corruption. Other ways are there, like 99 years lease they would take up. Other ways that tribal is gifting land to the outsiders. कैसे हो सकता है? Impossible है. But बंदूक रख दो तो सब कुछ हो सकता है. Other ways also, marriage, for example, spouse, a tribal spouse, and again a non-tribal marriage, again through that there is land alienation. Others like creation of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, so they are being displaced because of that. Okay? So number of ways this land alienation has progressed after the independence. Another very important impact has been that this area has come under, because it is located in central India, it is more accessible part of India. As a result of which this area has seen high level of monetization. High level of monetization. So पहले इनकी इकोनॉमी बहुत simplified इकोनॉमी थी. बार्टर सिस्टम पर बेस्ड था. They can get whatever they want. One, information has reached here, so they are seeing number of things which they were not using before. Now they also desire to use them. But many of these things, even the basic things, you cannot get with the barter system, because barter system is today broken. It is money oriented system. As a result of which, what is happening, the farmers or the tribals have no other choice but to adapt to new way of life. So some of them are adapting their agricultural practices, like for example, अभी हमने बोला Kuruk Oraon tribe. So it was seen that in Kuruk Oraon tribe, there was groups who are essentially trying to develop or use the technology of green revolution. ठीक है? But very clearly what will happen? It was a failure. No assured irrigation facilities, lack of technical know-how, lack of other know-how like what kind of seeds, etc. Ultimate impact was several cycles of crop failures, and this gave rise to high level of indebtedness. What was the ultimate impact? The tribes which were becoming indebted, they lost their land to the money lenders and they had to migrate to the nearby or other, if you talk about cities, and work there as laborers. Very commonly in these areas, one type of industry which is there is mining industry, where there is lots of jobs available. Okay? So this area is experiencing what? Very fast cultural change. Also in recent times, this area was outside Hinduism belt. But in recent times, Hinduism belt has been what? Emphasizing, has been trying to attract the people to become part of Hinduism. In this area, there is a struggle which is going on between Christianity and Hinduism. Both of them are struggling to ultimately capture more and more, convert more and more people to their own faith. Although the influence of Hinduism has been stronger in this area than Christianity. Only few pockets will be finding Christianity to be dominant. So this is another important characteristic of this area. Very importantly, famously, this area is one of the areas which is losing the languages very, very fast. So, loss of language is a very, very dominant phenomena in this region of the central belt. Then southern belt पे आते हैं. Southern belt is essentially coinciding with the Western Ghats. It essentially coincides with the Western Ghats region, where the core of this belt is the Nilgiri mountains. Very clearly, here also we find that the racial group is the Proto-Australoid, which is said to have also some traits of Negrito. Some of the traits of the Negrito race is found here. If you talk about this area, also has number of tribal groups which can range from very traditional like hunting and gathering tribal groups. Like for example, it is still found in some of the tribes of Kurumba, Palyan and some Chenchu. Then there is still shifting cultivation being practiced in the Kurumba tribal group. Majority of others have practiced what? Now they are practicing settled agriculture. Settled agriculture. This area is also what? It is part and parcel of the Dravidian. It is surrounded by the Dravidian belt. So in this belt also what we find, the changes have been very fast. The changes have been very fast. For example, in this area, an important tendency was seen that tribals are now beginning to practice plantation agriculture. There is development of plantation agriculture. Okay? So that is the case of southern belt. The most isolated geographically is which one? It is Andaman and Nicobar belt. Andaman and Nicobar belt. So Andaman and Nicobar belt में हमने already देखा है, very similar to the southern belt, Proto-Australoid plus Negritos. Proto-Australoids plus the Negrito. ठीक है? So many groups, you know, Onges, Jarawa, Sentinelese, Nicobaris, so many tribal groups are present. Important thing is, this is the area which has seen least of the impact. That means it is where most primitive tribal groups are still found. Most primitive tribal groups are still found. Like for example, you must have heard about Sentinelese. These are the people still fully isolated from rest of the world. Totally isolated from the rest of the world. So there was this incident, you must have heard, that one of the people went there and they simply killed. They are very hostile to the outsiders. Okay? So you'll be finding, like for example, Sentinelese are there. There is presence of Onjes. They are still doing what? They are still practicing hunting and gathering. They are still dependent upon hunting and gathering activities. Okay? So that is the Andaman and Nicobar tribal groups. Very important problem in this tribal group is that this tribal group population is very small. Population is very small. That means there are threats that in future these tribal groups would become extinct. Because there is a minimum population, minimum threshold population जिसे बोलते हैं. If there is no minimum threshold population, survival of that group is what? It is doubtful. Okay? For example, suppose there is few number of people. It is not necessary that if suppose they marry, they will have children. There can be biological problems. There can be various other issues. So there is what there is for biological processes to be successful, there has to be a minimum threshold population. And in many of these groups, that minimum threshold population, they are reaching below that. So how much time, if they remain isolated, if they don't intermingle, how much time they would be surviving, it is again a question. But this is one of the tribal region of India which is geographically isolate, and thus the impact is very clearly seen that here there is more still primitive cultures are preserved. It is the least, it is the area which has affected by least of the change has been affected. Okay, so that is basically the cases of the tribal groups. अब इसको कल एक कंटिन्यू करेंगे, कल नहीं परसों, एंड एक दिन मैं छुट्टी लेना चाहता हूँ संडे की. Monday we'll be starting with the same topic. We'll talk about the tribal problems का टॉपिक की बात करेंगे, and we will also talk about the population policy.